Joining us now, as promised, is one of the greatest shooters in BYU basketball history. He is Jonathan Tavernari, member of our BYU Sports Nation clan and the pre- and post-game shows. JT, good to have you, brother. How are you this morning?
I am fantastic. How you guys doing? The show looks great so far, guys.
Kristen's involved, JT, so you know as well as I do that when Kristen's involved, everything is elevated. She's our star performer, is she not?
Sorry, Jerem.
Listen, Kristen and I go way back, and, Brody and I have become very close in the last year. And so I have nothing but fond things to say about her. But Jaron and I do have a relationship for about 20 years. Jaron knows me longer than my wife does. And so
Oh, wow.
I'm between a rock and a hard place, my man.
All right. He's not here, though, so you can side with me on this one. Let's get your thoughts. I mean, we were calling the pregame, the postgame on Tuesday night against this massive win for BYU over the Jayhawks. What were your initial thoughts on that win? And I know you were at the building. Talk us through some of the emotions when you were there as well.
Well, listen, a couple of things that I will share, and then I would like to also give my 2 cents on what you guys were just talking about the seating. But I mean, as I go to my usual spot behind the basket, Spence, you and I talked about this as the game was about to start. I showed you my hand, and I had
goosebumps.
I had the chill, man, because I was like, I'm ready to go. Just do a transition three. The building was electric. I don't think we can overplay Bill Self's thoughts enough and everything that he shared complimenting BYU after the game. But one of the things that I think he hit the nail right on the head is they didn't get to see the best of the Marriott Center because it was never a close game, right? It wasn't very competitive game, and the fans were electric, but we never got to see like the deafening moment, throughout. After a big bucket and Kansas had to go and figure out a way to match that play or respond. And so, but what a fantastic atmosphere that was, and what a massive win. To kind of share what you guys talked about, massive game by Richie, massive game by Trevin. As I got to rewatch the game and see some highlights, I'm with Kristen and Blaine. Keba was the difference maker in terms of his energy, in terms of the approach he had to the game. And I think that set the tone early, just to say, culminating with that massive spike that he had of a block at the end of the game. And I will share this about what you guys were just talking about. I disagree a little bit with you, Kristen, on terms of, I think if they go 3-2, I don't necessarily think they need to win a game at the Big 12 tournament to be an 8, 9, 10 seed.
Really?
In my mind, an 8, 9, and 10 seed, there is not a ton of difference. And the reason why I said 8 to 10 is because of what you said, Spencer. You have to knock down a seed because of Sunday play. And so to me, and I think I shared this on Tuesday, if they go 4-1 and one of those wins is against Iowa State at Iowa, then at that point, BYU is actually in contention for the 4th seed, to be a 4th seed in the Big 12 tournament. So they have a double bye. At that point, I can't imagine them being lower than a 7.
It would take something extraordinary, to your point, Jonathan, to get BYU into the top 4 of Big 12 play. To me, it feels like BYU has to go 4-1 in the back 5 to be 13-9, and then, 13-7, and then you need the other teams to lose to help you out and hope that you win tie breaks against a team like Iowa State.
All you need is Houston to do what Houston has been doing against everybody, and that is win against Iowa State, because Iowa State has 2 less losses than BYU now.
Yes.
And so if BYU beats Utah at home, West Virginia at home, and takes care of business at Tempe, then the Saturday game, like Kristen, like we talked about on Tuesday, all the pressure in the world is in Arizona. BYU can come in there. They can show up in flip-flops, sunglasses, like, it was me back in Brazil, because the pressure is on Arizona. The pressure is not on BYU. And so, however, if BYU can go to Iowa and beat Iowa State, and Iowa State loses to Houston this Saturday, then I think BYU can, not easily, but I think the path for BYU to go 4-1, have, finish the league in the 4th seed, having the tie break against Iowa State, then at that point, I have a really hard time believing that this team, they're going to be they're going to be 22, 23 wins in a season. You know, and then at that point, I would say, guys, regardless if they win a game in a Big 12 tournament or not, I have a hard time with them being lower than higher than a seven. Well, lower meaning worse, right? Lower than a 7 seed. And if they win a game and get to the semifinal of the Big 12 tournament, you have to put them as a 5 or a 6 seed because of Sunday play.
Yeah, good points there. I think when you mentioned the Arizona game, they're going to walk with sandals. They're going to walk in relaxed, no pressure, right? And this will be the second meeting where they're taking on Arizona. So adjustments will come into play. What is the key there with that matchup? What does BYU need to do to walk out of Tucson with a win?
not go 6 minutes without scoring a basket. I think. I mean, Kristen, you and I talked about this enough as we were walking back to the Marriott Center. My goodness, that was a painful stretch of basketball, right? And I mean, Spence, you even mentioned that at the post game. You said, guys, you could hear sometimes a needle drop on the floor. You know, the rock never gets quiet. But here's the thing, too. Not necessarily because Arizona was getting BYU out of the game. Arizona had good looks, sure. But BYU just wasn't scoring because Arizona had multiple misses. You know, the team was getting stops. The guys were getting rebounds. They were getting open looks. They just couldn't capitalize on them. And so, you know, Arizona is number 2 in the league. They're still fighting for a potential championship some way, somehow. Houston has to drop the ball a lot, right? But again, you have Arizona's playing for a championship. BYU doesn't have that pressure. And so as you're looking at all of these things, you know, adjustments will be made mostly on making sure that the ball goes to the hoop more than it hits the rim and goes out. And but aside from that, you know, I personally think this game, you know, if you had to look at it, it means way more to Arizona on what happens if they win or lose rather than it does to BYU. And but that's why I say, you know, in terms of adjustments, as long as BYU makes shots, and let's be realistic, using the words of Bill Self himself, if BYU played the way they played on Tuesday, they would beat anybody, including Duke at Duke. And so, you know, and I mean, obviously, is there a way for you for you to bottle that? Maybe, but I'm excited to see what happens, you know, the day after tomorrow.
All right, JT, another debate we were having just a few minutes ago on the show is which is the better win over Kansas on the road last year at the Fog in historic Lawrence, Kansas, ending Kansas's 19-game home win streak and snapping their long streak over unranked opponents in conference? Or was it so dominant on Tuesday night at the Marriott Center that now takes the cake as the best win over Kansas?
Well, listen, I've recently finished watching reruns of Seinfeld, and, you know, one of my favorite things that he says is, when you're feeling sick and you're going for medicine, would you like quick acting or long lasting? Do you want to feel better now or later? I think you're always going to look at that very first win, you know, at Allen Fieldhouse and say, wow, BYU really beat Kansas in Kansas the very first time they played. And then when you look at what they did at the Marriott Center, I mean, listen, Spencer, none other than you and Jerem have blue goggles, and I get it. I expect it, and we'll talk about that. But not even you, my man, would have predicted that BYU would be flirting with 40-point win at home over Kansas.
Crazy.
And so, but to me, I got to say, Kansas in Kansas, beating them, it's very special. And to me, that ranks higher than what they did on Tuesday. Also because Kansas, you know, perception is reality, right? I mean, the perception is right now that Kansas is down and it's very so-so. But when you look at last year, it's not like we're talking about, you know, all hell is going to break loose and all is lost. And that, you know, people now, you know, are second guessing Bill Self. They're doing now this year, they're not doing last year. So I got to go with my boy Dallin Hall and, you know, the step back dagger.
Number 7 Kansas last year, by the way. They were ranked number 7 in the country at the time. And at Kansas, right? I mean, we were talking about this, Kristen, we were talking about this on the show. Talk about blue bloods, Kansas, Carolina, Duke, UCLA, maybe UConn, maybe talk about Villanova. It doesn't matter. One of the top 5 is always Kansas. For you to be the top 10 team on the road, you know, the way that they did, to me, that's a very special memory that I'll never forget. Okay, JT, other than hosting the pre- and post-game shows alongside Kristen Kozlowski, which is the highlight of your day, I'm sure, on Tuesday night, what was your favorite moment from the night? Was there a play or a specific sequence on the floor that you're like, that was my favorite moment?
Some of the things that I really enjoyed were, something that me and some of the guys that I worked with in the summertime, we always talked about, which is make them call a timeout. And there were multiple instances that happened, right? Right off the bat with Trav hitting back-to-back threes. But even in the second half, Spencer, there was a time that to me, it was just ludicrous. And Kristen, we actually talked about this, last year, I don't remember who it was, and you mentioned this, ran out of timeouts. And then this year, it was Bill Self. And, to me, one of the most telling things was Bill Self in the second half looking over to the ref and try to call a timeout. The ref missed it. They missed the shot. BYU in and knocked down a three. And then Bill Self actually jumped on the court in front of the ref calling a timeout. So that was my favorite moment. And then you could tell that, again, using Bill Self's word. Now, Kansas doesn't look like Kansas, and they play terrible. But, we were in the building, all three of us, right? A lot of that has to do with what BYU was doing to get them out of their comfort zone. And so, that was to me the culmination of like, wow, these guys are really locked in. They're getting Bill Self, who a Hall of Fame and just one of the bigger names in college basketball history. Not I want to say panic, but to get him out of his comfort zone that he's calling a timeout with 18 minutes to go. And with 10 minutes to go, he runs out of timeouts. I mean, those to me are my favorite moments.
Jonathan Tavernari on BYU Sports Nation. Always great to talk to you, my friend. Look forward to BYU in Arizona on Saturday. Until then, be well.
Hey,
Thanks,
and I'm
JT.
just going to say this. Yeah, hey, you see what happened to Jerem when he didn't get me a blueberry cougar tail. So we replaced
The
him
Royal
with
Blueberry.
the Royal Blueberry. There you go. So don't make me have you disappear, Spencer, if I don't get a Royal Blueberry cougar tail. You're on notice.
Hey, that Utah game. That's
I'm putting it in my calendar right now. Get JT a Royal Blueberry Cougar Tail or else.
I appreciate you.
Thanks, brother.
All right, thank you, JT.
JT on BYU Sports
guys,
Nation.
bye-bye.
Well,